I want to play something for you guys that really kind of blew my mind yesterday. Um, I was watching it. Let's see if I can find it here on my history. I didn't know that this was, excuse me, I didn't know that this was happening like this at the rate that is happening. Um, we're going to pull it up right here. Where is it at? I couldn't believe this. So the problem I'm going to have reporting the news is it's not going to be my original source. This video that I'm about to play for you guys, it's I didn't know that this was happening. Why are people killing their families? Now, for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm going to be starting my own news station. It's going to be called the Darshan Media Group. Actually, let me bring it up on the screen here so you guys can see it. So if you're watching on Facebook, I want you to pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you. I did not know that this was a thing. Okay. I did not know this. So you got to see the Darshan Media Group. And for those of you really need to take advantage of using your smartphones, I didn't even know you can do this on Facebook. YouTube need to do the same thing, but Facebook, I got all my little logos up there. Cheryl LeGrand, good afternoon. So anyway, murder suicides at an all-time high in America. I did not know that this was a thing that's actually happening. I know that it was happening, but this is a thing. So we're going to listen to Law&Crime give their 2 cents on what's happening with these families killing each other. We're going to talk about it. So we're going to play it here in a second. And this is going to be something that's also going to be featured on the Darshan Media Group. For those of you who are just tuning in, again, we're going to be doing worldwide news. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cover every single aspect, and we're going to talk about this news, and we're going to put it together in an honest perspective to find out what's going on with the world. And I'm pretty sure we're going to do open panels and things of that nature as well. So let's listen to Law&Crime Network talk about the murder suicides at an all-time high. I want you guys to pay close attention to what they're about to say.
Suicides across the United States, with more than 1,000 incidents taking place each year.
Oh, it's way more common than you think. Maybe not necessarily the violence aspect, maybe not necessarily the sort of physical abuse, but the emotional abuse, the mental abuse.
Even as recent as last week, a New Jersey murder suicide made national headlines. 57-year-old Peter Ventricelli opened fire on his wife, 58-year-old Kelly Ventricelli, and their 15-year-old son Anthony before turning the gun on himself. Their bodies
I didn't know that that was a thing. And this is crazy.
were found on March 7th when a family friend requested a welfare check. According to a GoFundMe page created by Peter's nephew Carlo Ventricelli, quote, "The shock of this situation has our family at a loss for words."
I'm not surprised that quote unquote no one knew. I'm also not surprised that there were no police records or anything like that.
If you're just tuning in on Facebook and YouTube, we are listening to the murder suicides at an all-time high in America. Why are people killing their families? This caught my attention last night as I was trying to put together my news YouTube channel called the Darshan Media Group, where we're going to cover every aspect of news media. We're going to give our perspective. Hopefully we can be the first one to report on things, but for the most part, we're going to be going over trials, murder cases, everything, kidnapping, all kind of stuff. We're going to cover it all.
It doesn't mean that it didn't exist.
But according to forensic psychologist Dr. John Delatorre, there had to have been warning signs.
It's such a difficult thing to see sort of warning signs when it comes to abusive partners, because I think a lot of times the person being abused is willing to engage in some kind of rationalization or justification, but it's a hard thing also to see the sort of very beginnings of coercive control and psychological manipulation and grooming and engagement type behaviors that abusers will use to sort of break down the psychological barriers at first. Once the abuser has broken down the psychological barriers, it's fairly easy to start breaking down the physical barriers as well.
Delatorre says though a motive may not be immediately clear, the murder suicide likely stemmed from a buildup over time.
And I want to be clear that people don't just snap. There has been a long history of mental, emotional, and physical abuse that had been happening within that relationship that people just did not know. Now, in what way was it manifesting? I don't know. But the truth is that there's always a sign, there's always something there. No one just snaps. Things like this don't come out of nowhere.
Only about an hour northwest of the Roxbury murder suicide, a separate murder suicide in Linden, New Jersey, just weeks before. A husband shot and killed his wife and two teenage children. These are just two examples of the more than 300 murder suicides so far this year, according to gun violence organizations. Statistically, that adds up to 11 murder suicides each week, totaling about 600 incidents per year.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see it in any relationship in which there is a power imbalance that is maybe not understood by both parties, right? There's always going to be a notion of conflict within a relationship. No relationship is perfect, but what we're describing are individuals who are attempting to maintain power over someone else through specific kinds of means.
But Delatorre believes there is a specific stressor that caused the increase in murder suicides in America.
A lot of the what we see in terms of the increase in murder suicide stem from the 2020 pandemic, particularly the lockdown.
Though we're now several years removed from the COVID-19 lockdown, Delatorre says it may have caused lasting damage in some relationships.
And I think even though the lockdowns have been lifted, I think what we're still seeing are the remnants of that, that individuals during that time found no coping resource. They found no outlet for anything. Now, usually we think of these added pressures of work and relationships being kind of the primary components to someone engaging in these problematic, sort of violent behaviors. But the lockdown presented a unique aspect where individuals who were abusing and were the abused were now trapped essentially in the same house all of the time. So while there might have been an opportunity for relief from the abuse because the person had to go to work or something like that, we didn't really get to see that during the pandemic.
He argues some couples could have formed negative habits during the pandemic and not yet found positive solutions.
There hasn't been an opportunity for individuals to really get themselves out of the holes that they were dug in during the pandemic. And that also has added pressure to these individuals who are likely to engage in maladaptive behaviors, these violent acts. They haven't been able to find a more pro social outlet for what is going on within inside of them.
The FBI reports 65% of murder suicides involve intimate partner relationships, with 81% happening at home. According to a study published by Harvard University, 59% of men who killed a female partner then committed suicide. Delatorre believes there's a clear reason why men are more likely to commit murder suicide.
I think the audience needs to be clear is that it doesn't matter what gender you are. Anyone is capable of violence at any time. What we're seeing, however, is that there are a lot of males who engage in domestic violence and intimate partner violence because of the notion of entitlement. Right? Women don't generally have a notion of entitlement the way that men do. Men believe themselves to have access to certain things or get things in the way that they want it. And because they don't get it, or because they don't get it the way that they want it, they're more likely to engage in aggressive behaviors because of the power associated with being just physically bigger.
Delatorre says abusers often use forms of manipulation and later justification for their actions.
The person that's abusing you will then try to different manipulation techniques like giving you flowers and apologizing and stuff like that, right? As a way of keeping you sort of in the relationship. It's a very push-pull technique that the abuser is going to look that you probably never even recognize was happening until it's way too late. There are a lot of statistics that go around about the pressures associated with why someone would engage in these kinds of physically violent acts. But again, these are just excuses, these are rationalizations that the individual uses. The person chose to engage in this violent act. They didn't have to. There's nothing in society that says that in order to be dominant, that they have to be physically violent.
But all that doesn't mean women can't also commit the crime.
So again, it's not to say that women can't engage in violence. It's that men are quicker to engage in violence because of societal notions about what it means to be a man and the entitlements associated with it.
The children were killed by ligature strangulation. Ligature strangulation causes the victim to become unconscious anywhere from 10 seconds up to a minute. The more the victim struggles, the longer it takes. After the victim is unconscious, the ligature must be held in place with force, squeezing the neck for up to an additional 4 to 5 minutes to cause death. Therefore, she had to strangle each of them to unconsciousness and then make sure the bands were squeezing their little necks for several minutes. She could have changed her mind at any point during that time and removed those bands from their necks, and she did not.
Massachusetts mother Lindsay Clancy made headlines in January after strangling her 3 young children to death before attempting suicide by jumping out of a second-story window. She survived the attempt and is now charged with multiple counts of murder. But Delatorre says the Clancy incident isn't necessarily the same as a murder-suicide.
When we're talking about why women kill, it's a little bit different than when we're talking about domestic and intimate partner violence. There's some underlying psychological issues that are at play that are very different than someone who's willing to engage in a murder-suicide pact. But if it's only the children, then I think it's something different than if it's a murder-suicide. Now, it could be a little bit the same in that.
Caught the ad before it caught me. Yeah, so this is very surprising. And I want to cover these cases, especially like this, because I didn't know, again, I didn't know that that was a thing. I really didn't. I didn't know that that was an issue that was happening with people. I knew that something was happening, but at the rate that it's happening, man, that's a lot. That is a whole lot, man. And it just really gets to me when it comes down to the kids. It's like, what did the kid do? You know, in order for you to do that, what did the kid do? So let's go ahead and continue playing it.
Than if it's a murder-suicide. Now, it could be a little bit the same in that the rationalizations behind committing the act, right? The mother killing her children can be very similar to why a dominant partner would decide to kill the subservient partner and the children, in that they believe that they're going to be in a better place, or they're angry about some, notion that's going on in the relationship, right? They can kind of cross the past, but the pathology underneath why a woman would kill her children versus domestic and intimate partner violence aren't necessarily the same.
But for those that do commit murder-suicide, having children doesn't necessarily deter the abuser.
Abuse can happen in any form, in any relationship at any time. And just because a child is involved doesn't mean that the abuser is going to stop. Many times, the person being abused is more than willing to take more of the abuse in order to prevent the abuse from then moving towards the children.
9 out of 10 times guns are used to commit murder-suicides, but Delatorre says it's not the only form of murder abusers use.
If you have a gun in the house, the more likely you are to use it. But I don't want people to think that guns are the only way in which abusers are going to kill their partner, right? There are plenty of ways in which a person can kill another person. One of the again, another underreported aspect of domestic violence is using strangulation, right? So I think what's unique about the United States is its use of guns. But if a person wants to kill you, there are there are a lot of ways in which they can do so.
As far as prevention goes, Delatorre says there are many avenues to explore.
There are also societal and institutionalized issues that are at play, that those need to be reckoned with. There are also just ideas of gender roles and gender norms and how individuals participate within the context of a relationship that also need to be explored and identified. Well, this is not an easy thing to do. There's so many different avenues to explore. So we need to explore all of them first.
If you or someone you know is struggling with domestic violence issues, call 800-799-7233 for the Domestic Violence Hotline. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Sierra Gillespie.
And there you have it. So, murder-suicides at an all-time high in America. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it on the Darshan Media Group. We're going to be doing a lot of different things, and we're going to highlight a lot of different stuff that's going on, and we're going to try to get down. We're going to try to get down to the bottom of it. Anyway, I'm your host, Darshan McAway. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thank you for subscribing to the Darshan Media Group. We'll catch you guys on the next go round. Peace.